Afternoon adventures. I say as it's 2:26 a.m. So a little while back I made something of a review of the Aberrant Mind Sorcerer from Tasha's Cauldron of Everything. I figured I should probably follow that up by doing the Clockwork Soul as well. The Clockwork Soul's features are a little less interconnected than the Aberrant Mind were, which I think will make them a little easier to form opinions on because they really stand by themselves. They don't rely on other features to build their value. So let's just start right from the top with Clockwork Magic, the extra list of spells that Clockwork Souls get. Level 1, you get Alarm and Protection from Evil and Good. Protection from Evil and Good is a solid spell. I see this cast at all sorts of levels, right up through Tier 3. It gives a large amount of creatures disadvantage on their attacks to hit the target of the spell, which is phenomenal. I can't really say anything bad about Protection from Evil and Good. Alarm, on the other hand, isn't necessary at all. It's nice if you're trying to take a rest and you don't want creatures to sneak up on you, but at the same time, that's what having someone stand guard is for. So as long as you've got some perceptive people in your party that can stand guard effectively, I don't feel like Alarm's necessary at any point, so I would switch that out, and I would switch that out for Armor of Agathis, because Armor of Agathis is a spell that's normally only available to Warlocks, and having it on another class I always see as something kind of exciting. I like to be able to pull a trick out of my hat and say, I'm going to cast this spell that sorcerers don't usually get. Armor of Agathis, though, is something of a frontliner spell. It's something you would take on a Pact of the Blade Warlock to help protect you and also deal damage to enemies that hit you in melee. So as a sorcerer who focuses more on spell casting, probably not as useful. But if you want to be a multi-class, something like a fighter sorcerer or even a barbarian sorcerer, being able to set up Armor of Agathis before a fight even starts and then go in swinging and deal some extra damage to enemies that hit you and give yourself extra temporary hit points as a buffer before you take real damage. These are all great things. So being able to take Sorcerer instead of Warlock in order to get that could be good for some builds. That really depends on you and what you're going for with the character. Although, you can upcast Armor of Agathis, and Armor of Agathis is even better with a higher level spell slot. And Warlocks are limited to 5th level with their upcasting because of the way Pact Magic works, but the Sorcerer doesn't have that restraint. So if you wanted to cast a 7th level Armor of Agathis, and then run into the front line, get hit, and deal 35 damage to the enemy that hit you, it's an option. I think there's something there, especially if you take, like I said, a barbarian dip and rage at the start of combat to take less damage, but you're still dishing out that full, in this case, 35 cold damage. The cold damage isn't reduced if you take less damage. Hopefully I'm phrasing that in a way that makes sense and not just saying damage entirely too many times. As for 2nd level spells, which you get at 3rd level of course, Clockwork Spells gives you Aid and Lesser Restoration, both of which are phenomenal. I love both these spells. These spells should be used in every party. Although Lesser Restoration is already on a lot of spell lists, it can be taken by bards, clerics, druids, paladins, and rangers. So if you have any of those classes in your party, you probably got Lesser Restoration covered. You shouldn't need to cast it a whole lot of times per day. So I would swap that out and let someone else handle it. As for Aid though, I would absolutely keep Aid, because just having more HP is like healing, but preemptive. I have a high level healer character that I play in Adventures League when I can. He's tier 4. Tier 4 doesn't get run as much, but he starts adventures by casting Hero's Feast and casting high-level aid spells to buff the party's maximum HP so that when they start taking damage during the adventure, it's not their real hit points, and so I already have sort of done my job as a healer just by giving them those extra. And because it's an increase to their maximum hit points that lasts for 8 hours, lasts for an 8-hour duration, I can then heal back those hit points that they lost. The point is, 8 is great, and if you don't have something like a cleric already spamming it at the start of each adventuring day, keep it on your list and spam it at the start of each adventuring day. On to 3rd level spells, because I've spent long enough ranting about aid. We get Dispel Magic and Protection from Energy. Protection from Energy requires concentration, and while it lasts an hour, resistance to one damage type probably isn't worth your concentration in combat. So, situationally, the spell could be useful if you're heading into the frozen north, or having an adventure in a volcano where you know a certain damage type is going to be prevalent, but at the same time, is it worth your concentration for an hour? Is it worth your Clockwork spell slot? I think probably not. Also, Dispel Magic, we can just learn as a sorcerer anyway, so we can feel free to swap that out from Clockwork Spells for something new. So I would swap in Rope Trick, because Rope Trick is normally not a sorcerer spell, and I like to take spells that I can't just learn normally. And Rope Trick is a neat way to hide from enemies, or just get a short rest in somewhere that maybe isn't the most restful. And also sorcerers could cast it as an extended spell, make it last 2 hours instead of 1. There's value there. So that would be my pick for a 3rd level spell. 4th level, which we get at Sorcerer 7, of course. We get Freedom of Movement, which is solid, and we get Summon Construct, which is the only spell Clockwork Spells feature gives us from Tasha's, and it's a summoning spell which sorcerers also just don't get any of in general. So I would absolutely keep this. It does require concentration, but having an extra creature on your side of the battlefield taking damage for you instead of your teammates dealing damage to the enemy, that can only be a good thing. So even if you don't end up casting it that much because you're concentrating on other things, I think just having it in your toolbox is a strong option. Freedom of Movement is also a strong sort of utility buff spell because it allows you or a creature that you cast it on, whoever you cast it on, to swim. They have a swim speed. Their attacks are unhindered by being underwater, and they can escape from non-magical restraints and grapples by spending 5 feet of movement instead of usually an action doing those things. So in a situation where you're worried about being grappled, or you're going to have part of an adventure or a whole adventure underwater, freedom of movement's great. If you're not expecting those things, it's maybe not the best. Yeah, I would probably just leave 4th level as is. Can't complain. And finally, with our 5th level spells, level 9, we get Greater Restoration, amazing, and Wall of Force, amazing. Although Wall of Force is already a sorcerer's spell, so we could learn that separately and swap it out for something else. Greater Restoration, though, if you don't already have a cleric, spamming it. Shouldn't need to spam it. But even if you do have a cleric, just having another creature that has access to the spell and more total spell slots in the party that can be used to cast it could be really good. This is another spell I don't see most of the time needing more than a couple of per day, but considering it can cure exhaustion and something like petrification, having them on hand is important. When they come up, they really come out strong. The Clockwork Spell feature also gives us our Manifestations of Order, which are just reflavorings for some stuff that happens around us. They have no mechanical effects. They're just kind of cool when we cast spells. At level 1, otherwise, we get Restore Balance, which I want to like as a feature, but honestly it just feels a bit lackluster. It's basically if a creature within 60 feet of you is about to roll an attack roll, ability check, or saving throw with advantage or disadvantage, you can use your reaction to nullify that advantage or disadvantage and force the creature to roll with a straight roll with neither. Which I guess could be useful if something's attacking you or an ally with advantage. You can reduce their chance to hit by taking away that advantage. Or if you have like a rogue in the party who's attacking but they have disadvantage, you can nullify that disadvantage so that if they have another ally within 5 feet of their target, they can get sneak attack, but that's very niche. And there are other ways to get advantage to that rogue. Like if you have a familiar, you can have them use the help action, or you could just run over and use the help action on your turn, of course. So I don't see Restore Balance as being all that useful. I don't think it compares to features like Tides of Chaos or Bend Luck from the Wild Magic Sorcerer, though you can use it a number of times equal to your proficiency bonus, and you don't have to pay any sort of other resource like sorcery points, for example. So it has that going for it. I just don't see it getting used that much or to that strong an effect, but as a level 1 feature, I guess it's not that bad. I guess I would have to see it in play to really be able to pass judgment. Either way, on to Bastion of Law at 6th level. This is another feature that I want to like. So you spend an action and spend between 1 and 5 sorcery points, your choice, to give a creature a magical ward. It can be you or it can be another creature. And the ward has a number of d8s equal to the amount of sorcery points you spent. And when a creature that is warded takes damage, the creature can roll a number of d8s out of the ward's pool, as many as they want, and reduce the damage by the amount rolled. And on paper, that seems pretty great. You know, damage reduction is just as good as healing later. But for the exchange rate of about 4.5 points of damage reduced per sorcery point, I'm just not convinced it's worth it, especially considering you get this feature at 6th level and you have to spend between 1 and 5 sorcery points to power it, which is almost all your sorcery points. So you could have a ward that reduces incoming damage over the next adventuring day by 5d8, or you could cast 5 spells as subtle spells, extended spells, distant spells, you know, that thing sorcerers are built to do. The reason they even have these resources to begin with. I just don't see Bastion of Law to be worth doing until you're higher level and have more sorcery points that you can burn. They're just too important, I think, to being a sorcerer. To be a sorcerer, to be an effective sorcerer, you need to use meta magic to empower the spells that you cast. The whole deal with being a sorcerer is that you don't get to learn as many spells as something like a cleric or druid or wizard, and you don't have access to as wide a variety of something like those classes, but you can cast each one in more and more creative ways. They can cast a twinned damage spell or a twinned buff spell. They can cast a spell as extended to increase its duration, They can cast a touch spell at a range of 30 feet with distance spell. No other class can do these things, and they need sorcery points to do these things. So spending spending sorcery points on reducing damage by a few points, it just doesn't feel right to me. So if I were playing a Clockwork Soul Sorcerer, I would probably use Bastion of Law, but I don't know if I would fuel it with the full 5 points, and I don't know if I'd bother refreshing it once it ran out. I just used too much meta magic. Onto the level 14 feature, because Sorcerer subclasses do like to skip from 6 to 14. We get Trance of Order. You gain the ability to align your consciousness to the endless calculations of Machinus, that place. You use a bonus action, you enter a sort of avatar state for a minute. You enter a state where every d20 roll, I shouldn't say every d20 roll, but every attack roll, ability check, or saving throw you make where the die result is less than a 9, is 9 or less, you can treat as a 10. It's the same as the Rogue's level 11 feature Reliable Talent, but it also applies to attack rolls and saving throws. But you don't really make that many attack rolls as a sorcerer, at least beyond second level spells or so. There are some good spells with attack rolls. I'm a big fan of things like Chromatic Orb, Scorching Ray, I like, but once you get into like 3rd level and higher spells, most spells that deal damage use a saving throw rather than an attack roll. So me being able to treat a 9 or lower as a 10 on my attack rolls is only marginally helpful when at best I'm upcasting, say, a Chromatic Orb or a Scorching Ray to get my damage out. Although, if I were to twin, say, a 5th level Chromatic Orb, just trying to deal damage to 2 creatures, being able to guarantee that my 5th level spell slot and 5 sorcery points from twinning that don't go to waste because my chance of missing is essentially nothing would actually be pretty worth it. So I think I like this feature now that I've sort of talked myself into it. High level spells don't usually use attack rolls, but you can cast spells that use attack rolls as high level spells, if that makes sense. I have a character who's part sorcerer, part cleric, part wizard, what can you do? That his whole shtick is upcasting basically Chromatic Orb into high level spell slots because he doesn't have high level spells. So if you're going for something like that and you want to deal that single target damage and you don't want to ever miss, having a baseline of 10 on your attack rolls, plus, assuming plus 5 because you've got 20 in charisma, plus 5 because of your proficiency bonus at level 14, you're rolling a minimum of 20, and that's without magic items that increase it or anything like that. 20 will hit most creatures in the game, provided they don't have the shield spell or parry reaction or something similar to that. Most creatures in the game don't have more than 20 AC. In fact, over 18 is already pretty rare. As for ability checks, I don't really make a lot of ability checks in combat. Martials sometimes grapple, that's a thing, but I don't do that as a sorcerer. So that one's kind of irrelevant, although I guess you could use it out of combat to give yourself advantage on perception, investigation, your history check to recognize who that statue is. But I don't feel like that's a very good use of this feature. Or not advantage. It's minimum 10. Not worth it is the point. But for saving throws, it's also quite nice. Although up in tier 3, level 14 plus, saving throw DCs are probably going to be 17, 19-ish. So if you've got a good stat and you're proficient, if it's for sorcerers, if it's a charisma or a constitution saving throw, you're probably going to nail it. If not, having a 10 on the die probably isn't going to help that much, unless you've got resilient, which again just gives you proficiency. But for charisma and constitution saving throws, that's pretty good, especially considering maintaining concentration requires constitution saving throws. So having a minimum of 10 on the die plus probably 1 or 2 constitution, 12 or 14, plus proficiency bonus of +5, you're going to have, you know, a baseline of 17 or so, or 16, which means you'll be able to take hits of something like 32, rounding, 33 damage with the minimum of 16, and you won't be able to fail that saving throw. So with Trance of Order active, you'll be able to concentrate and not have to worry about your concentration, even if you're taking some pretty big hits. So that's really nice. That's actually quite good. That's a big point in the pros column for Trance of Order. Overall, I think it's worth doing. I don't know if it would be worth doing outside of like a boss fight. I don't know if it would be worth spending the 5 sorcery points to use it more than once per day. But it's a good option when you need it. And as for level 14 Sorcerer subclass features, I would say this is actually probably one of the better ones. No, I wouldn't. Divine Souls and Dragons get wings. I take it back. They win. But Trance of Order, I don't know. I don't know what to think of Trance of Order. If you choose to cast lots of spells that use attack rolls, Trance of Order is great. If not, it's pretty much just helping your concentration saving throws. And if you're worried about those, just grab Resilient. No, you don't need Resilient. You're already proficient. Just grab Warcaster. Give yourself advantage. It's almost just as good. Almost. And finally, level 18, Clockwork Cavalcade. Basically, you create a 30-foot cube where 3 things happen, and I'll take on each of these effects piecemeal. First, the spirits restore up to 100 hit points, divided as you choose among any number of creatures of your choice in the cube. I'm always a fan of healing on classes that aren't normally healers. Something like the Celestial Warlock having their pool of d6s that they can use to heal people as a bonus action. I think that's great. Or even just like a Barbarian with the healer feat. I love it. Anything that takes pressure off of the clerics and paladins in the party to keep people alive, I'm a big fan of. So if I were a Clockwork Soul sorcerer and I were level 18, I would absolutely use Clockwork Cavalcade at least once per day to just give my party some health back. And you can divide the 100 hit points any way you choose, so if 2 people each take 46 and 51 damage, just heal them up. You can do it. Second effect, any damaged objects entirely in the cube are repaired instantly. I don't see this being used pretty much ever. But hey, if there's like a collapsed archway that you need to get through, or a door that's, I don't know, whatever, repair it. If there's a bridge that's broken, repair it. Why not? It's instantaneous. And the third, every spell of 6th level or lower ends on creatures and objects of your choice in the cube. It's a glorified Dispel Magic. It can be cast on a lot of things at once, so that's real good. And it can dispel things up to 6th level without having to make the roll that you normally need to make for Dispel Magic. So actually, even as I'm talking about this, I'm kind of talking myself into it. I actually think this is pretty decent. If your party gets hit with something like a slow debuff or hypnotic pattern, this could take it off of your entire party all at once. And there's value in that. Or if you walk into a room and there are a bunch of glyphs of wording, just dispel them. So yeah, actually, the more I talk about this, the more I'm on board with it. I actually think Clockwork Cavalcade's pretty good, and once you use the action, you can't use it again until you finish a long rest, unless you spend 7 sorcery points to use it again. Now, 7 is a pretty high price, but it's better than not being able to do it at all. So, while I don't see myself using this more than once per adventure, if you, say, use it to heal a party member 100 points that got hit with like a nasty disintegrate or something, and then you come to a room filled with glyphs of warning that also has a bridge broken in the middle of it, I would probably spend the sorcerer points to do it again. And you can do all 3 of these things at once. Like I said, the more I talk about this, it's sounding better and better, so you could tell your party members, hey, stand next to this broken bridge, and then repair the bridge and heal them at the same time. So actually, I'm on board with this. I'm on board with Clockwork Cavalcade. It's just the stuff before Clockwork Cavalcade I just feel really ambivalent about. So that's my transition into the overall review. I know a lot of gameplay happens before level 18. Some groups just don't play that high. I play a lot of adventures leagues, so I play that high as much as I want to, as much as people will run that content. That's less of an issue. So I always build with level 20 in mind. But I also know how long it takes to get there, and I don't want to be weak, obviously, leading up to that point. So Clockwork Soul Sorcerer, I just don't feel like it gets features that make you better at being a sorcerer. At least it doesn't get enough. Having extra spells is nothing short of excellent. It is great to have those extra 10 spells from Clockwork Sorcery, Clockwork Spells. And it's super cool that you can trade out those spells for Warlock and Wizard spells, as well as Sorcerer. I think these are really cool things, and there could be quite a bit of really nice crossover, a lot of really nice combinations you can put together with that. But at the same time, they don't cast them any better than a base Sorcerer would. And also, the level 6 and 14 features. So, I don't see myself playing Clockwork Soul Sorcerer up to level 18. If I were to jump into a campaign that was at the high levels, if I just had a friend that was like, hey, we had someone leave and we have an open spot, do you want to play? And I'd be like, sure, let me put together a thing. I would consider Clockwork Soul Sorcerer at high level. But at the same time, there's a lot I would consider at high level. So I think I would just be a sorcerer that gets more at the low levels that I could use for the whole career of the character. If I get a feature at level 1 or level 6 that's really good, I have that feature in my toolbox for many hours of gameplay. And that's, in a lot of cases, that's worth a lot more than having a high level feature that's really strong. That's really, really strong. Like, that character I mentioned earlier that is a mix of sorcerer and cleric and wizard, he's never going to have level 9 spells because he's multiclass too much. But he, for many levels, has been able to cast spells like Shatter or Lightning Bolt and use the Tempest Cleric Channel Divinity to maximize the damage, and that's a really awesome thing that he's been able to do for a long time and will always be able to do. So losing the high level spells doesn't feel like as much of a cost for him because he's already awesome, if that makes sense. he's already a lot of fun to play and has been for the dozens of hours that I've played him in games. And that's really important. And that's something that the Clockwork Soul lacks for me. Obviously, if you play the Clockwork Soul and you enjoy it, more power to you. Play what you want, enjoy what you enjoy. These are just my thoughts. So, if you do play a Clockwork Soul and you enjoy it, or if you don't, let me know. Tell me in the comments. I have comments. How it goes. I want to hear from you. And if you play it at high levels, I especially want to know. If you find any fun multi-classing stuff with it, let me know. Multi-classing is my jam. So anyway, that's what that class does. Those are my thoughts on it. If you play one, please let me know in the comments how it goes for you. Let me know if you like it, what you don't like. If you learned something, or if you just enjoyed, leave a like on the video, because that's a thing that YouTubers say. And if you want to hear more, the algorithm doesn't know me yet, so make sure you subscribe, so you know when I post stuff. Otherwise, YouTube's probably not going to tell you. Thanks for watching. If you watched all the way through to the end, thank you. And we'll see you in the next one. Peace.